A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Just Africa. We are reaching you live from our studios at SouqNews Television. We dive deep today into the forces shaping Africa's economic and development landscape. We turn our attention to Africa's currency outlook, a critical lens for understanding the continent's financial stability, trade competitiveness, and growth potential. I am Oyinpriye Krumale, and I'm not on the program. I have another African beside me. Night Olumide. Good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Krumale. How you doing? Welcome to Just Africa. Of course, we did dive into economies and trends set in the world.
Yes. Today we are looking at African currency outlook. And recently we've been said that Zambia, their currency is the kwacha.
Yes.
Uganda, they use the shillings. Nigeria, we use the naira. And Ghana, that uses the cedi. They're all in what we're talking about today. So it looks like Zambia kwacha is gaining strength in the market. Uganda itself also, it's maintaining a steady phase, but it looks like it's also gaining strength. For Nigeria, they say we are stabilizing, including Ghana. And besides, for your information, Ghanaian cedi to the dollar is about 10 cedi. And for the kwacha, the Zambian kwacha, it's about, about 29 or 20 kwacha. But for Uganda, it's about 3,600 and something shillings to the dollar. Of course, for Nigeria, you all know that 1,500 is over between 1,500 and 1,600 naira. But as it is, it looks like the Zambian kwacha and the Ugandan shilling are strengthening.
Yes.
And this is because they seem to have more products being exported now, and the company or the economy is favoring exportation. For Nigeria, our export at the moment, though a large percentage of it is in the non-oil sector, because of the agricultural produce and some of the non-oil export produce that we've been having, including the recent reforms that Mr. Yemi Cardoso has been, championing using the instrument of the Central Bank of Nigeria, the economic reforms that the current administration of President Tinubu is championing in this space. We seem to be gaining some form of ground and momentum. But you know what? The Nigerian CBN MPC meeting is taking place recently, and they say they don't want to mess up with the recent gains that we've been yielding in this inflation progress that we have been making. Well, that would be a good one. What's your take on it?
Well, I said it earlier on that there was a poll that was done to ask people whether they want the MPC rate lowered, stable, or increased. And I think about around 60-something percent said they want it lowered. I think about 11% want it reduced, and the other fraction want it increased. So, but then again, you have to also applaud the Central Bank of Nigeria. You have to applaud what they've been doing and how they've been able to maintain, a stable FX, stabilizing it at 1,527. It boosts investors' confidence.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, but for Zambia and Uganda that I referenced earlier, they see their currency seem to be strengthened, like I said earlier on. So, what the advantage, accrues to the country is that a stronger currency, makes import cheaper.
Yes.
It makes import cheaper in the sense that when you're importing with the amount of money less than what you used to import. So for those who are importing raw materials into the economy for the purpose of manufacturing and production, seem to be making some form of gains, and that in itself make a production cost reduce to some extent, including the overhead, and probably give vet more space for production and supplies. But for those who are involved in exportation, they are experiencing some form of difficulty and some form of challenge because of the stronger currency.
Yes.
And because if they are going to export, they are going to need to pay in that currency, which on its own workings with the United States dollar is going to be of a disadvantage to that But on the other hand, when we look at investor confidence, it has a way of strengthening investor confidence in the sense that for market volatility, when the currency is volatile to an extent, there is some form of unprediction.
Yes. You can't plan. Companies, investors can actually plan on the long term.
Exactly. So, but for economies that have a stronger, that their currency is sort of stronger at the moment, there seem to be confidence from the investor's perspective.
Yeah.
And on that case, now, cross-continent Africa-wise, the currencies are moving in different direction. Uganda and Zambia have emerged, surprised performance, gaining ground in global currency rankings and showing signs of macroeconomic resilience. Meanwhile, Africa's economic giants like Nigeria and Ghana are holding steady but grappling with internal pressures that could test their stability. We'll go on a break, and when we return, we'll have our guest join us on the program, and the conversation continues. Do stay with us.
Over the past 10 years, we've seen that the impact of many lawmakers have been underrated. A few are playing a pivotal role in enacting laws and shaping policies for your community, society, or nation. Then this is for you. The People's Choice Legislative Excellence Award celebrates the individual achievement of lawmakers who have worked tirelessly to enhance the lives of their constituents and contribute positively to their entire well-being. Now, if you're wondering where this will be taking place, it will be taking place at Radisson Blu Dubai Creek on the 25th of September 2025. To take part in this award, all you have to do is send an email to SouqNexus.com or send a message to the WhatsApp number scrolling on your screen. We want to see you at Radisson Blu Dubai Creek. Wouldn't you rather be there?
In an age of artificial intelligence and automation, it is easy to overlook the value of hands. Yet in Ghana, hands still build nations. From Adinkra cloth printers in Ntoso to traditional kente weavers in Bonwire, Ghana's indigenous skill economy continues to prove that African creativity is not just cultural, it is commercial. Looking beyond the surface of heritage to the engine room of informal training systems that have powered generations and could power Africa's industrial future, Ghana comes to mind. In Ghana, apprenticeship is not a fallback.
Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on the program. Now, our guest joining us on the program today is Professor Ojo Emmanuel Ademola. He is a Nigerian-British authority in cybersecurity and information technology management. He is a chartered manager and fellow of both the Chartered Management Institute and the British Computer Society. He serves as an academic ambassador and CMI-approved chief lecturer in leadership and management. As an IT subject matter expert, reviewer, and educator, Professor Ademola brings unique insight on how technology intersects with policy, business, and economic transformation. He is also the chairman of the Professor Ademola Ojo Emmanuel Foundation. Professor Ojo Emmanuel Ademola, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Very many thanks to you, and thank you once again for joining us on the program Just Africa. Now, we are looking at Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, and Ghana. We are looking at our currencies, and recently it looks like both Zambia and one other African country that just escaped, Uganda rather, their currency seems to be strengthening, while that of Ghana and Nigeria are maintaining the status quo. And this is not unconnected, first of all, to the central banks of each countries and also the economic indices and the trade between these African countries among themselves and other countries abroad. So as we look at the conversation today about Africa economic outlook and maintaining sustainability in the economy and trade, first of all, what strike you? What would be your first take as long as this topic of conversation is concerned?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. What strikes me most on this is the big picture, the broader picture, the micro landscape. And when I'm talking about the micro landscape, I'm talking about the trajectory of currency across various African nations, which are increasingly diverging, influenced by a combination of internal policy, decision, and external economic shocks. So what am I saying about that? You have to look at, I've had that conversation over and over again, but we need to begin to look at the several key factors that is the driver that's driving these trajectories. Not from economic view alone. You need to look at the social view. You also look at the political and the tech view, which we summarize into including the fluctuating commodity prices, differing in what we call monetary policies, and variation in capital flows. What I mean by that is that when you look at the commodity prices, it play a very crucial role. As many African economies depend heavily on the export of raw materials. So in other words, when you are talking about this, you are now talking about the productivity level. Yes, you take note of the changes in global demand and the pricing for commodities such as oil, minerals, agricultural products. These are significantly impact our currency. It gives the strength and economic stability, as you may know. Additionally, you also talk about the monetary policy adopted by individual countries. You can see that divergence there, such as interest rate adjustment, inflation control measures, further contribute to these disparities. So you don't have a kind of uniform way of looking at this. Central bank approaches to managing the economy can lead to various currency variation or valuations affecting trade balance and investor confidence. These are the things that strike me in this, especially when you talk about the four countries, the Zambia, the Nigeria.
Professor Ademola, thank you very much, Professor Ademola. Now, let me quickly, sorry I had to butt in here. Now, whilst you were responding to my question, you actually referenced commodities. And in Uganda and in Zambia, coffee is one of the commodities for exportation. Cocoa is also another commodity for exportation. And one of the countries also specialized in the exportation of gold. But most of these exports come without adding value or adding some form of, having factories where they can be manufactured or add some form of value before they are taken out of the vicinity of this country. And they come back in value-added, ways where they have been gone through the processes of manufacturing, either from China or from the United States or from the United Kingdom. And this does not all go well for the economy. How come is their economy or the currency in these economies still, strengthening against the greenback?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me give you an example. Uganda shillings, for example, the outlook is much of anticipated appreciation of local currency. That happens, there are key drivers to that. So there are key drivers to that. They adopt what we call the conservative approach to it. That is, there's limited demand for foreign exchange. If you go to Uganda, you know that the current demand for foreign currency remains subdued, which helps support the local currency. It is attributed to, what you can call a stranded trade balance and reduced imports. You see, it leads to less pressure on foreign exchange reserves. Another driver you look at is remittance stability and tourism rebound. The stability of remittances from abroad to Uganda economy has provided what you can call crucial inflows of foreign currency as well, supporting domestic spending and contributing to overall economic health. So the rebound in tourism sector is also expected and is doing that at the moment to further bolster their foreign currency inflow, particularly as global travel restriction ease. See, another way of looking at it that I usually call drivers to this pattern you are seeing, maybe stability you are seeing in this conservative approach is prudent monetary stand by the Bank of Uganda. The Bank of Uganda has adopted cautious monetary policy in different ways, aimed at maintaining inflation within target levels while ensuring the stability of the currency. It's a disciplined approach to foster a stable economic development, the economic environment conducive to exchange rate appreciation. You can see what I can call character. That is the overall strategy emphasizing internal discipline and the focus on demand side dynamics.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Ojo Ademola. So, if you look at Zambia, for instance, one of the things that helped the economy was this restructuring debt deal that they got from IMF of about over $1 billion for an extended 38 months, called the Extended Credit Facility. So, and also it exports copper. But if you look at it, if I may ask, do you think that these two key factors is what is actually helping Zambia's economy?
Yes, when you look at what is happening, for example, the IMF aligned fiscal reforms. You can see the Zambia currency aligned with those reforms. It's like you are taking the reform from off the shelf and you are trying to domicile the reform. This reform aims to promote responsible budgeting and fiscal discipline, fostering an environment conducive with sustainable growth. So you can see that one, which also is obvious within the debt restructuring effort as well. The effort is ongoing to restructure national debt, as you know. All these are affecting need. And the copper you have mentioned is a matter of character. What I mean by that is that the economy is heavily reliant on commodity exports, particularly the copper. So Zambia has not much when it comes to minerals. The copper is the main something, and they're hugely following the global trend on that. And additionally, it remains it's what we can call the external factor, the IMF conditions and the influences of that. So you can say there that those restructuring in Zambia, for example, driven by external factor, particularly through the strength of its import, benefiting from resilience rooted in the commodity-based economy. It's purely commodity-based economy, and there's less they can do except they follow and align with the IMF monetary policies, and that's why the economy is a bit stable, and that's the way you should be looking at it. Thank you very much.
All right. The reason why I was asking this was because this initial debt restructuring that they got from IMF, it was as a result of the 2020 loan default. 2020 post-COVID era, Zambia defaulted on their loan, which was why they were given an extended credit facility. So my reason why I'm asking this is that if the IMF decide today that they are pulling out or they are not going to bail Zambia out, how would the economy look like?
Yeah, you should know that they are using framework. I think IMF normally review this framework depending on when you default on the national debt, then they restructure it again and they put it within the framework they use, which is minimum of 5 years. Then projectively, then they can now restructure it at mid of that 5 year, another 10 years. So it's a web of restructuring. In as much that Zambia, which is commodity-based economy, we just want to follow that. And remember, it's not in their hand. It's in the hand of the policy coming from IMF and thereabout. And we are talking about external factors here. You mentioned COVID. Who knows what can happen going forward? You can only trust that all this risk, this high risk, restructuring kind of things, will not come up unexpectedly. Then if it come up unexpectedly, then IMF has a way of innovating the framework, the debt restructuring framework, in order to suit their client, in this case, Zambia. So Zambia will just be looking more at the external factors, as I've just said it before, and continue to produce. You see, they have to up their game when producing copper, because that's what they have on table. That's the card they have. You see, when they produce more, then that will be technically influencing whatever IMF is coming up when it comes to the issue of debt restructuring. Zambia needs to begin to produce more of their copper.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. But Prof, there's this skepticism in that all Africans, Nigerians, including Nigerian and African prominent businessmen, carry around. And the skepticism is not far-fetched. The thing is this. It's like you just talked about how it will be more profitable for the Zambian economy to continue to produce and to focus on the copper, which is a valuable material or raw material, right where they have it. The IMF is seen or perceived to be sponsored by the West, who are always, instigating production of these raw materials in African countries because they have factories and manufacturing hubs in the West. That means Zambia and other African countries are providing these raw materials for them, to the depletion of their economy, because they do not have manufacturing hubs back at home in Zambia or in most African countries. So it made us a dependency continent. How can we forestall this dependency nature and this dependency theory of global economy, so that we will be able to stand alone and trade within Africa if we have these manufacturing hubs in Africa, in order for us to buoy liquidity within the continent?
Okay, thank you very much. We are still using the Zambia scenario here. Now you are bringing in the Nigerian one. Across the board. The more you borrow, the more you will now rely on IMF policy also. We have to be, fiscal reform has to be internalized. And we have to harmonize the structure within Africa itself, because IMF is financed by the West, as you have said, and they look for their own interests. From technology point of view, I've been advocating for Africa indigenizing our own debt structuring in one way or the other. I know African Development Bank is doing a lot of work, but the real solution is that we need to up our game when it comes to productivity. For example, let me give you an example of what happened to Nigeria when the oil input or the oil output recovery, that is increased. It leads to a significant rebound in oil production. So we need to begin to look at some other area whereby we can rework our productivity increase and rely less on borrowing. When you rely less on borrowing from IMF, then look at what Uganda tried to do. I don't know, the conservative approach Uganda is using, that could work if they can look for a better way and improved way to ensure that they are trying to suppress demand for dollars. I think this is when they suppress demand for dollars, by up the game of productivity in all the commodity they rely on, then things will begin to work out. And we can internalize our own economic system within Africa structure. See also what Ghana is doing to see this in order to stabilize. You can try to liberalize your currency as well to strengthen productivity. So indigenous company can benefit. You see, for example, when you are talking about commodities that take care of us, when they now take the raw material from Africa and take it to the West or China to refine, to reproduce, we must begin to indigenize the process of productivity, getting the finished material in our place as well. That's what technology will do for us. That's why our budget, the national budget, must concentrate on how to get the finished product right from our soil. In doing that, then you can begin to involve in trade by barter tech kind of things. Let the expatriate, as it used to be in the 60s, in the 70s, let them come toward the direction of our commodities instead of our commodity going to them. And let's have a robust economic framework in order to work things out, in order to suit the need of African economy. That's the way we can do it. Up the productivity game, then come on with some policies that will liberalize the issue, the use of this kind of, like what Nigeria did to liberalize unification of policy by the central bank to stabilize the foreign exchange. That's the way to go, really. You understand what I'm saying? I think, for example, the CBN implemented foreign exchange unification policy, a more cohesive and efficient foreign market to make it transparent, to remove corruption within the internal system, align multiple exchange portfolio rates to do. So make this thing accessible to local manufacturers, and you begin to strengthen. Let's stop this, or we begin to scale down on our commodity moving outside African shore. And let's begin to look at if they need the commodity, let's come up with policy to bring them down to our own place. That we should begin to look at it. And that's how we can strengthen even our currency and become more productive economy instead of relying on this external shock that can come and nobody will have control over it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Before we go on a short break, in your own opinion, with the interest rate relatively high, do you think Nigeria, or is Nigeria attracting more foreign capital or scaring off local growth? And secondly, do you think that Central Bank of Nigeria can keep up this balancing act, between inflation, exchange rate, and growth?
Yes, we just need to tighten our monetary measures to combat inflation. That's the way I want to respond to it as a manager. The implementation of stringent monetary policy is vital to control inflation. When you can control inflation, are you with me? You curb the inflationary pressures, you can stabilize prices, you restore confidence in currency, forcing healthier economic landscape. Then, by so doing, you consider what we call the risk consideration there. When you are talking about risk consideration there, you are talking about trying to look at, for example, what can we do to increase diaspora remittances? What can we do to do that? How can we encourage our people to come and begin to invest locally? The long-term sustainability of this stabilization effort is what I can call intricately difficult to manage. If, for example, if you link it to the global oil output, you need to diversify to other commodities. You need to rely more on diversification instead of concentrating on pressurizing OPEC to increase or whatever to do. So that is the risk there. When you diversify, when you increase, you make the environment conducive, and you look for a way to improve diaspora remittances, then your currency begin to gain more local strength. You can look at the dollar, naira to dollar now. It's beginning to stabilize. I can hear Rabi saying something yesterday that it's beginning to look by end of the year that it can stabilize and it will be around $1,200 1,200 naira to a dollar from where we are now, which would be a huge improvement on stability. When we put all those things together, we diversify the economy, we strengthen the monetary measures by looking at the risk consideration, and instead of relying much on the global oil prices, the fluctuation there, they let diversify to impart more revenue stream into the nation. Then we go from there. This will rely on the effectiveness of government policies and how effective those reforms are. There are a lot of reforms there, and those reforms must begin to turn to reality on fostering growth and sustainability. That's the way I would like to look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ademola. Now, we are not done with our conversation with you yet, but we are due for a break. When we return from the break, we'll continue our conversation. Thank you so much. We'll be back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Lesotho, a country like no other on the African continent, and in fact, like no other in the world. Nestled entirely within the borders of South Africa, Lesotho holds a unique geographical distinction. It is the only independent nation on Earth located entirely above 1,000 meters in elevation. Its lowest point, at 1,400 meters above sea level, is higher than the highest points in countries like Netherlands, Denmark, or even the United Kingdom. This extraordinary altitude earns Lesotho its nickname, the Kingdom in the Sky. Lesotho is one of just 3 countries in the world that are completely surrounded by one other country, the others being San Marino and Vatican City in Italy. But unlike them, Lesotho is not a microstate. It boasts a proud population, a strong cultural identity, and a landscape marked by rugged mountains, deep valleys, and fast-flowing rivers. What also makes Lesotho stand out in Africa is its climate. While much of the continent is known for its warmth, Lesotho regularly experiences snowfall, especially in its highland regions. In fact, it is home to Afriski, Africa's only ski resort south of the equator, drawing tourists who seek winter sports in an unlikely location. But Lesotho's uniqueness goes beyond geography and weather. The Basotho people are known for their iconic wool blankets, worn with pride across the country. These are not just for warmth, they are deeply symbolic, representing milestones, rites of passage, royalty, and social status. No traditional ceremony is complete without the presence of these beautifully patterned and color-coded blankets. The traditional Basotho hat, or mokrotlo, is another national symbol, so important that it appears on the country's license plates and currency. Lesotho also harnesses the power of its water. Its Lesotho Highlands Water Project exports fresh mountain water to South Africa, while generating electricity for domestic use. Water, often called white gold, is one of the country's most valuable resources. In many ways, Lesotho defies expectations. It is a country of heights, both literal and cultural. In a continent known for deserts and plains, Lesotho offers snow and slopes. In a region often shaped by lowland agriculture, Lesotho rises up proud, elevated, and unshaken. Lesotho is not just unique to Africa, it is unique to the world. This is the uniqueness of Africa, and today we spotlight Lesotho, the Kingdom in the Sky. I'm Moyosore Adebi for SouqNews TV.
On the night 18th of August 2025, Paris will come alive with the prestigious People's Choice Governors Awards taking place at the Gauche Hotel, Paris. The prestigious People's Choice Governors Awards is designed to celebrate governors who have contributed immensely to their states in different countries across the world. If you are a governor who's gone above and beyond to deliver transformative projects in your state and country, then this award is for you. To partake of the Governor's Excellence Awards this year taking place in Paris, all you have to do is send an email to SouqNexus.com with the words, "I accept," and we will get right back to you. You can also send a WhatsApp message to the WhatsApp number scrolling on your screen right now. You don't want to miss Paris for anything, and we are looking forward to celebrating you and your achievements this year. So contact Souq Nexus to make that happen.
Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on the program. We are still conversing with Professor Ojo Emmanuel Ademola. We're talking about African currency outlook and how these currencies and their markets is faring in the global space. Welcome back to the program, Professor Ademola. Many thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, I want to bring you back home very well because you referenced the recent reforms that is taking place in Nigeria and how the Olayemi Cardoso has been faring in that space, floating the exchange and all of that. Recently, the MPC meeting have met, and before the current MPC meeting, when they met, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso said, "We're going to maintain the status quo. The NPR, is still at 27.5%. And so we were looking at why didn't he bring it down? Now, currently they are meeting, and we are looking at probably it's going to be when the MPC meeting is done, we'll be moving down from like 27.5% to about 25% or 24%. But one of the reasons he gave why they had to maintain the status quo, it was that the economic reforms that the Tinubu administration is undertaking is also yielding some benefit, and the reforms that the MPC and the CBN have equally undertaken in regards to the economy is also yielding its benefit, and that in order for these reforms to combinedly yield the expectation of the administration, they need to maintain the status quo. If not, it's going to disrupt this inflationary progress and profit that we are currently making. Do you share that perspective?
Yes, you are talking about issue of stability. They must come up with different policy from different angles. So, in my own view, they have gotten it right now. Through the reforms they are doing, they have gotten it right. They just need to maintain the status quo and begin to diversify internally. Using the same framework now, let the central bank begin to diversify, working with the Ministry of Finance, then budgeting, and they begin to diversify, make life easier for indigenous manufacturing company. They have gotten it right now. That's what I'm saying. They just need to improve on the indices, on the drivers, and look for a way to expand the drivers, making the environment more conducive for manufacturer. If you look at what Rabiu said, BUA said yesterday, it was very classic in the report they are giving. And if they can try to bring down the inflation, then the pressure will ease on our foreign exchange. Let them continue to liberalize what I mean by liberalizing is that making the less pressure on import and making the dollars much more available to people, to manufacturers, the real stakeholders, those who really need it, let them have it. And when it comes to policy, I think Cardozo have done well with all those policies he has done. They need to maintain the status quo and just improve the indices, the input to those frameworks, and keep on expanding those inputs in order to maintain the stability of the currency. Listen, if you are looking too much on the external factors, then we'll be running a risk of competing needlessly. What we need now is to also collaborate, within the African context. Look at what is happening in Ghana as well. You see, up the game of productivity, and then we are in the next maybe at the end of this, maybe 2-3 years, then they will see what to improve on their policies, and if they need to improve it, then they look at it to improve it. But at this point, they should maintain status quo in light of sustainability to stabilize and to gain more from the reform. The result are just coming in. I just need to be stable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, Prof, before, I think this should be my last question to you, then my colleague is going to ask you some questions before we let you go. Now, regards, my last question is twofold in one. You referenced Ghana, but you know, the Ghanaian references you made and some of the advantages that you think their currency and their economy has enjoyed was as a result of the redenomination of their currency in 2007. So my question is, did that redenomination exercise brought any form of advantage that is worthy of emulation that Nigeria can toll? That's the one aspect of my question. The other aspect of my question had to do with your forte in the digital and financial space. So what role do you think that digital financial system and the secure payment platform play in supporting currency resilience across Africa?
Now, going back to the issue of denomination or whatever, what the Ghanaian government did is to engage with the IMF to secure financial assistance. And as a condition for that, the denomination came into play in the area of enhancing their fiscal responsibility. This partnership does not in any way provide funding, but guide the government in implementing policies. It's about how you can get the policy right. When you get the policy right, then you use the policy to promote the economic stability and growth. For example, they have to strengthen their cocoa exports. You see, they came up with different policies to strengthen the cocoa export. And when you can do that, then you begin and make sure they increase the level of productivity in the issue of cocoa. That's what I can say about that. Policy must come up with a way of improving the environment. Now, when you are talking about digital tools, we are in digital age. And one of the strategies is that you should know now that the Naira is very vulnerable now. I don't know what Nigeria is doing about cryptocurrency and so on and so forth, whatever. The digital tools are more in favor of crypto than our traditional currency, the money currency, and so on and so forth. So, but those digital tools are there and they are even fluctuating. The best thing we can do is to secure the digital space in order for us to improve what we have on ground. And as time goes on, the US just came up with different laws, and Europe about cryptocurrency, and Nigeria must also begin to look into that direction as well, so that they can tap into the currently innovative digital tools available in improving our even the foreign exchange one way or the other. As I used to say, I've been to the Silicon Valley several times, and all these our shares and stock, Wall Street, and some of the people writing their programs, for example, the FinTech program, cybersecurity, they are from Yaba, and that has led me, and I'm still advocating that we should now begin to have cybersecurity hubs in every local government of Federation of Nigeria, 774 local government. Let's have cybersecurity attached to financial intelligence, whereby we can begin to work on available digital tools and begin to indigenalize our own. You see, we must have our own financial digital tools. Otherwise, we be relying on what I can call things that are not reliable, and that could be very dangerous going forward. It is now time of AI. We should begin to indigenalize our own perspective into digital tools and work things out according to what is available. You see, I've written a lot of articles on that, and I strongly believe that the government will continue to tap into those huge resources in making things work for our financial sector and improve our forest. Thank you very much.
So much, Professor Ojo Emmanuel Ademola. Thank you for your time with us this afternoon and having this robust conversation concerning the currencies and their fluctuations, their benefits in the international space with regards to business, economy, and development in the continent of Africa. Thank you for your time with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
And Prof, by the way, we want to have you not very far from now again concerning some other critical conversations still within the confines of business, economy, and development. I hope you will oblige when we extend the invitation.
I'm always available to you in as much that so I came earlier late because I was meeting my doctoral students. So I'm available. Let me know when you want me in, especially when it comes to the area of policy and fiscal management of the economy. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, Olumide, this is a good place for the first half of Just Africa to close, because we have another prominent guest who is joining us on the second half, and we are talking almost on the same thing, but this time on the forex space.
Yes, he spoke extensively about how different economies have been able to balance their currency. And he actually shed a lot of light, and I think I've taken a lot of things into consideration.
Yes, Zambia expanding their production in copper.
Yes,
that's the condition that the IMF gave them, including Ghana in their debt restructuring. Well, we're going to break. Just Africa returns in a few moments. Do stay with us.
My name is Shino Ogbadegeshin. I'm the CEO of Gozi Micro Insurance. Continue to watch Souq News.
Adenike Adeyemi, Executive Director of Faith Foundation. Keep watching Souq News.
My name is Shepherd Michael Adewale Onofuye. I enjoy you all to always watch SouqNews TV.
Hey everyone, Majuli Obaje here representing Gigi. Keep watching Souq News, okay? Stay updated with Souq News.
My name is Aton Keme. I am the head of MSME banking. Please keep watching Souq News and stay glued to Souq News.
I recommend that more and more people should watch SouqNews News because they deal with business news.
Hi, my name is Amaka Wokolo. I am the director of the Faith Institute at Faith Foundation. Keep watching Souq News. For more than a century, Zambia has stood as a prominent figure in the mining sector, particularly renowned for its copper production, which remains a cornerstone of the nation's economy. Accounting for 3/4 of the country's export earnings, mining plays a pivotal role in Zambia's economic landscape. The focal point of this mining activity is the Copperbelt province, home to major copper mines like Lumwana and Konkola, alongside Sentinel in the northwestern province. These mines, operated by renowned international firms such as Barrick and Vendetta Resources, hold majority foreign ownership, with Zambia Consolidated Copper Mine Investment Holdings retaining minority stakes. Smaller mines in the Copperbelt region, backed by investors from countries like China, Brazil, and South Africa, contribute to Zambia's diversified mining landscape. However, the country's mining sector faces various challenges, hindering the potential growth trajectory. Fiscal policies introduced by the government, including royalty increases, the taxation policies, have negatively impacted mining profitability. Also, price volatility in global markets, infrastructural deficiencies like inadequate transportation networks, power shortages, and an uncertain regulatory environment further increases the sector's challenges. Moreover, labor disputes, safety concerns, and geopolitical risks stemming from political instability poses additional hurdles to Zambia's mining sector. To propel the nation towards its 3 million tons copper production goal, strategic measures are crucial, and these include leveraging digital technology through partnerships with AI and machine learning firms to enhance sector's efficiency and investment, stable policy framework in order to attract and retain investment, and provision of a conducive regulatory environment. Infrastructure strengthening supported by donor funding and concessional financing can also alleviate critical constraints such as transportation and power shortages. More so, environmental conservation is vital for sustainable development. Hence, mining companies must provide government-approved environmental management plans, prioritize durable equipment, and proper waste disposal techniques to minimize environmental degradation. Given copper's expected dominance in Zambia's exports, maintaining its position as Africa's economic hub demands a concerted effort. Israel Adeyemi, Souq News.
Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on the program. We just finished having a conversation with Professor Ojo Emmanuel Ademola, who shed so much light on the economic, the currency outlook of African countries and how sustainable this is within the market space, within the continent in regards to trade, business, investment, and development. Talking about some of the things, raw materials that each of these African countries are endowed with, from Zambia to Uganda and Nigeria and Ghana, and some of the economic policies, fiscal and monetary policies that the CBN in these respective nations have taken to enhance the economic, outlook of their country, which equally affected the value of their currency. We referenced the Ghanaian redenomination in 2007, how the role that the International Monetary Fund played in that space to influence Ghana to do what they did, and the edge that they got as a result of that. So we will be going to our next part of conversation. Now it's still within the confines of the currency outlook, but this time we are going to the forex market.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's jump in. In this second half of Just Africa today, we turn our attention to the forex inflows and the rise through exports, diaspora remittances, and external financing in investments and critical reforms implementation by the government of the respective countries. So what does this mean for trade and business confidence and Africa's development trajectory? Stay with us. We unpack these dynamics and, explore how currency stability is redefining economic opportunities across the continent. We'll go on a break, and when we return, we should have our guests join us on this program to continue the conversation. But first of all, before we go on a break, and have our guests joining us on the program, he referenced some of the policies that these African countries made. For Zambia, he referenced the fact that they are actually focused on copper, which is one of the materials you mentioned, and that the IMF and even the West, which have a very huge stronghold on the economy of the African countries, seem to be promoting the production and the export of copper. So the question running through my mind, why not the production, value addition, and then export of the finished product to maybe other African countries or including the West? So that's what was going through my mind, and we tend to want to look at that particular part, briefly, but our time was up. So I'm looking at the economic advantage that African countries stand to gain if we had value to some of these exports. He referenced Ghana and how they need to upscale their production of cocoa. But for Uganda, which currency, when we look at it and give no comparative analysis, is not as strong as what we have in Ghana, what we have in Nigeria, neither what we have in Zambia. Though the difference is, the margin is not very wide, but it's something that has its own benefit, advantage-wise, in the economy. So how do we add value to our own product? In Nigeria, the recent policy that the government makes. Yes.
Well, okay, we're not talking about Nigeria. If you look at Zambia, if you look at, let's start with Ghana. Ghana did quite well for themselves in the production of, how will I put it, in refining gold.
Yes.
Cocoa, they converted it to chocolate. Yes, arguably, it might not be the best, but yes, they are producing these things,
yes,
which means they have the capacity, they have the facility, structures have been put in place to make sure that these raw materials are processed into finished value-added goods, and it can be exported out. So for Uganda or for Zambia to achieve that, they also have to put these structures in place. Thank God for President Tinubu, Buy Nigeria First. Thank God for the 30% raw material processing and all that. So I think other countries can also emulate it. Even though 30% for me, I feel we can opt it or upgrade it to 50% or even 70%.
70%. That 30% is a good place to start, at least to start by way of policy.
Well,
it's quite small.
It's quite
but it's not
small.
It's not a bad one to start from. Yes, and we're going to break, like I said earlier on. Our guest is standing by, and when we return, we'll intimate you with the profile of our guest and the business we'll be doing after then. Stay with us. Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on the program. Now, joining us on the program is Oluwatosin Oladeta. He is a seasoned public policy expert, business and corporate strategist, and vice president of finance with extensive experience in guiding organizations through transformation and growth. As an independent director and project management advisor, he brings deep expertise in strategic planning, financing model, leadership, and change management. Known for this critical thinking, analytical acumen, and emotional intelligence, Oluwatosin has successfully deployed innovative approaches such as design thinking and idea incubation to drive a business transformation and policy development across sectors. Oluwatosin Oladitan, you are welcome to the program. Many thanks for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Afternoon to you. So we are looking at the currency outlook and Forex. First of all, before we really jump into the meat of our conversation this morning, I was surprised that compared to the dollar, the Ghanaian currency is 10 cedis to a dollar. In Zambia, the kwacha, which is the currency in Zambia, it's about 20, 24, or 25 kwacha to the United States dollar. In Uganda, it's about 3,650 shillings to the United States dollar. And in Nigeria, of course, you know it's about 1,000. It's hovering between 1,500 and 1,600 to the dollar. With all these differences and variations in African currency to the United States dollar, do you think that is a good yardstick to measure the economic performance of these African countries together?
Okay, so let's start with why is the dollar used to measure economic performance of African countries? So if you look at the dollar is a relatively stable currency, which means that, and you also look at close to 40% or over 40% of global trade is denominated in the US dollar. So although there's been a position recently to be able to shift to more currencies such as the euro, right, and also probably the Chinese yen, although that has always been a conversation that has come to play over the last couple of years. But recently, when we saw that America implemented the trade war in Trump 2.0, as we usually call it, Trump 1.0 was in 2016 to 2020. Trump 2.0, we'll see that one of the issues is to increase the tariffs to other nations. And also, we saw the tariffs between the US and China going as high as over 134%. Before we had a bit of moderation and stability within that particular space. So why is the dollar used? African currencies are relatively more volatile. The one that is relatively stable is the CFA franc, which is not benchmarked to an African bank, but it's more or less benchmarked to the French or to the France central bank, which is more or less with that. So if you want to compare, you always want to compare something with something that is a bit stable. For example, we'll see that why is the Naira having that kind of position of 1,500 to a US dollars when we have that Ghanaian cedi is just like around 10. We'll see that Naira devalued, right? We could see that we could see a devaluation of the Naira more or less to reflect the money market conditions. Also, these are also conditions that are put by the IMF and also the World Bank to ensure that if you want to go and take up more debt from them, they also want to say that the Naira should be more or less like a free float. Now, when it was, let's look at like about 4 years ago when the Naira was exchanging for 365 Naira in the official market and is operating for 700 or within the span of 750 to 800 Naira in the parallel market, which simply means that the Naira was not trading at its true value, or the Naira was not really trading at its true value because the central government is more or less providing some interjection, which is what we call a managed float or a peg or a curtailed float, which means that Naira, the central bank will provide a bit of support, provide a bit of interjection into the exchange rate market so as to be able to stabilize it. So it is not trading basically on a law of demand and supply. But currently the Naira is trying to operate on a willing buyer, willing seller basis, although we've seen a bit of interjection by the central bank, especially when it was getting within the 1,600 corridor earlier this year. But we've seen that there are less interventions by the central bank compared to the previous interventions that we've seen this year. So we'll see that the central bank, when the central bank observes that the devaluation is getting so much or there is more demand than the supply, the central bank will try as much as possible to pump in some currencies or some dollars. We've seen close to like about $200 million as we used to stabilize the exchange rate to be allowing it to trade within that particular corridor. Now, is it a good outlook or is it a bad outlook for Nigeria? That's something that we need to really look at. We've seen that investors are going to be having more confidence in something that is relatively stable. Currently, if we look at the amount the dollar traded closing the year 2024 and the position as at June 30th, or even the position as at now, we see that those that believe that the naira was going to devalue by another 38% as it devalued in 2023, 2024, lost their bet. So we see that a lot of people are trying to hedge or take positions on Nigerian money market instruments, right, which has even appreciated significantly far above the way the naira, if they had kept their investment in dollar, it would have appreciated. So the exchange rate closed at 1535 as at December 31st, 2024. But when we're going to close the year as at 20th of June this year, it closed at 1529. That is the parallel market. Although we also say that there were some up times, there were some big time, but what we can see currently is that the naira is a relatively much more stable than it had been in previous points in time. Are we likely to see an appreciation of the naira very soon? Those are some of the issues that we're likely to discuss, just like Prof has mentioned, and some other highlights you also mentioned, and those are some certain things that we need to. But is the naira trading at its true value? The naira is trading close to its true value at around the 1,500, 1,600 meter, which you currently see, compared to other currencies and other markets thereabouts. So also when we look at the reason why the CDs is trading like that, so we see that there is a bit of an intervention in also in their currencies to ensure that the to drive a bit of an appreciation. So we see that the CDs is increasing in strength. And if you look at currently the Ghanaian economy over the last 2-3 years, there've been a lot of monetary and also fiscal reforms, which are more or less structured to position the Ghanaian economy to be able to thrive. Currently, we see that inflation rose in Ghana to as high as 54%, and we've seen that there was a technical default on their euro-denominated bond, which is the foreign-denominated bond, sometime in 2023, before we had IMF interjections. And all those things, economic and monetary and fiscal measures, policies are more or less structured to position or to balance the economy. And all these have an impact on trade.
All right, thank you very much. Now, experts have described the Ugandan shilling as one of the best performing currencies in Africa today. So can you tell me, do you agree first of all? Secondly, what makes the Ugandan shilling one of the best performing currencies in Africa?
Okay, so the reason why, one thing that people look out for when they're analyzing currencies is majorly the stability. And if you look at the Ugandan shillings over the last couple of years, it has been relatively stable in the exchange of the dollar. So when we see something that is relatively stable, there are no disruptions or there are no volatilities within that. Someone can be able to also look at that and something relatively stable. So in Uganda, inflation is around 3.9%, which is close to the inflation rate you will see in civilized economies. We've seen that also the exchange rate, the interest rate is around 9.75%, which although is a bit higher than the inflation rate, but also to be able to see that. And naturally, it simply means that if I'm going to keep my money in a bank or keep my money in an instrument, that I'm earning 9.75%. Meanwhile, the cost of goods and services are only increasing at an average of 3%. Simply means I'm able to earn more income than I'll be able to earn. So let's look at Nigeria, for example. Was around 30% until the inflation was rebased. That is, compared to when we're using the 2010 as the base year to be able to measure inflation and other indices, where it was changed to use the 2024 as the base year for inflation. And recently we saw the GDP being rebased using 2019 as the base year. Although there are still one or two issues concerned with that, but you could see that this the reason why the Ugandan shillings has been a bit more or less like one of the best performing currencies is the relative stability in the exchange rate to the US dollar. Also, we see a very low inflation rate, and we've also seen even inflation is within the corridors of developed economies, like around 2%, 3%. And we've also seen a relatively stability in the interest rate, which is also significantly high. That means someone is able to earn more than is able to lose based on a year-on-year increase in that.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Oluwatosin. Now, before I have so many questions to ask you, but we need to go on a break. when we return, we'll continue this questioning and continue to get some of the analysis you need to give concerning our topic of conversation. It's Just Africa. We'll be back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Dr. Souq A. Adedeji, whose leadership has significantly transformed Nigeria's tax administration, is a distinguished first-class graduate in accounting from the prestigious Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and he currently serves as the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS.
I firmly believe in the wisdom encapsulated in the statements. Revenue growth is the lifeblood of the national economy, providing means to fulfill essential duties to its citizens. These words capture the core principle that will guide us as we navigate the challenging terrain ahead, ensuring that our nation thrives and fulfills its obligation to its citizens. In our pursuit of greater fiscal future, we are determined to align ourselves with President Bola Tinubu's Extreme Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee. This collaboration will enable us to shape the prosperous fiscal landscape that will empower our nation's growth and development.
Born on January 8, 1978 in Ogbomoso, Oyo State, Nigeria, Dr. Adedeji is an accomplished accountant and public officer with extensive expertise in corporate taxation and public finance. His journey in public service began in 2011 when he was appointed as Commissioner for Finance in Oyo State. In that capacity, Adedeji introduced transformative financial reforms, most notably the establishment of the Treasury Single Account (TSA) to streamline government revenues and expenditures. In March
Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us. We have Olua Tosistin with us, and we are having a conversation on currency, African currency outlook, and we're looking at it both from the forex and the trade and business, economy and development. Well, many thanks for joining us on the program. Ellie?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Oh, great. Welcome back. Now, whilst I was reading your profile, it was very clear, I told where it was written that you, guide your extensive knowledge and business acumen led to guiding institutions, business organizations, and training, and all of that. So let me bring this question this way. When a country's currency is strengthened, like between 2024 and 2025, there's been a relative stability in the Nigerian naira. The same thing also applies to Ghana. Now, do you think this particular disposition strengthens the performance of the informal economy in operation in these two climes, most especially in Nigeria as well? Or what other aspects should we be looking at if with regards to economic performance and efficiency and the performance of these SMEs in that space to promote the informal economy?
Before we get to the informal economy, we usually see that just currently that we've seen that in Nigeria there have been some drastic economic reforms and there's been a bit of appreciation. But the average man on the street is going to take a while before he's able to feel the impact. So we're seeing that it's still on paper. We say that Nigeria is developing, Nigeria is getting its traces back, Nigeria has to devalue the currency or allow it to trade on the winning buyer, winning seller basis. But before the informal man is going to feel it, it's going to take a while, right? So for example, we've seen that as a result of the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, whereby the prices of oil went up, right? The prices of oil increased, and the naira was still a bit relatively stable, which means that Nigerian foreign exchange is no longer edged towards the case of the volatility in the prices of crude oil, as we've seen in previous time. But an average man on the streets sees that things are still quite expensive. So before we get to the informal sector, now first thing we should look at is the informal sector also has a key role to play. Like we say that Nigeria's major economy is majorly informal, that we have a few formal sector, but the informal sector is not really active. So we're not really seeing the active voice of the informal economy, right? Which means that a lot of things are not really accounted for. So it's going to take a while. There's usually this lag between the effect or the result from the formal sector of the economy and the informal sector of the economy. Now, so many things can happen within that lag between the outcomes of economic reforms and the impact on the informal economy, right? So it now takes that what is the sustainability of those reforms? What is the impact of those reforms? And how long is it going to take before the average man on the street feels it? Now, but an average man on the street is surely going to feel the fact that, okay, fuel was initially 925, NNPC and some other major players in the downstream sector have reduced it from 925 to like about 875, 865 within that particular space. So for example, Enugu Electricity Distribution Company said that they are repricing from 209 to like about 164, the band 8 tariffs. And the next thing we're going to see is that the GenCos are saying that you better need to do your calculation well, because that is going to increase the debt within that. So until the average man on the street goes to be able to buy or to be able to trade with the available cash he has with him or her, that is when he's going to be able to feel the effect. But are there economic reforms? Are there strengthening in the Nigerian economy? Yes. Are there strengthening in the Ghanaian economy? Of course, yes. Because we could see that from the indices which we could be able to use to measure, right, drastic growth in the economy, we could see that there is more or less like a positive outlook, but it's going to take a bit of time, or we could say a lag of, let's say, an average lag we usually see in economic balances is within the space of 18 months to 36 months. But what are the things that an average business can do between that time after these reforms have been instituted and when it's going to be able to impact the bottom line? Those are some other things that we really need to see how businesses can position themselves. Another thing that we also need to clearly make mention of is that the Nigerian interest rate has more or less been relatively stable over the last couple of years, over the last couple of months, so as to also drive or force down the impact of inflation. So, for example, the Monetary Policy Committee is having their briefing today. Hopefully, before the end of today, in the next 2 to 3 hours, we should be able to hear the outcome of the monetary policy decisions. But we should not expect a significant drop, right, in the monetary policy rate currently at 27.5%, because the inflation that we're seeing is a rebased inflation. The true inflation on the market is still a bit higher than the 22.22% that is currently being reported. So, for example, when we say that the flood crisis in the last 2 weeks affect the farmers, in which they are not able to ship tomatoes or they are not able to ship farm produce. Also, we've seen issues of insecurity, which is also affecting people to have access to their farms. Also, we are also seeing that especially in Nigeria, from the release of the last outcome of the GDP, services sector still contributes significantly. After services sector at about 55.55%, we then see agriculture before we now see industries. Industries is contributing less than 20%. And that speaks to what you mentioned before, that Nigeria is majorly exporting raw materials. Nigeria is not really trying to position itself to be able to add value, to be able to export value. Nigeria's value-added export is less significant to the raw material export that we're taking out of Nigeria. And yes, we had a surplus. We had a trade surplus position for the year 2024, and that trade surplus has been maintained over the last 19 months, right? So we could be able to see that there is an improvement. But for Nigeria to be able to achieve as much reforms or be able to achieve as much, for the average man on the street to be able to feel it, we need to take a while, right? I've mentioned about the lag, but Nigerian industries need to be able to perform better than what is currently happening at this point in time, because it seems like the value is being captured, that we are still exporting and extracting value to other sectors to other countries to be able to deliver those value. Meanwhile, we're just exporting raw materials. And the longer we continue to export raw materials, the more we are not able to capture the value that will be able to allow Nigeria's economy to be able to boom.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Oladiton. Now, for looking at Zambia, one of the conditions IMF gave for their support was for them to increase their copper export. So, in my opinion, or should I ask you this, do you think Zambia should focus more on increasing their exports in copper? Secondly, as Zambia's copper export earnings, is it enough to ensure long-term currency stability?
No country is going to benefit from exporting raw materials, right? Because when you look at the whole value chain, the ratio of the earnings or the ratio of the profit, especially in the raw material, is very, very small compared to other kinds of production. So when you have your primary raw materials, you convert it into semi-finished goods, you could now become a secondary raw material, you convert it into further processing it further until you are able to set up, right? Exporting copper is very good, right? But what is the value you get exporting raw copper rather than setting up a manufacturing hub that can convert this copper into semi-finished products or close to the finished product that can be used. So if Zambia is a net exporter of copper, which is one of the conditions of the IMF, right, based on, especially when you have structured finance or you have interventions from IMF or World Banks or all these multilateral organizations, they want you to export more. Yeah. So for example, Nigeria needs to be able to export more crude oil over the long period of time. But Nigeria is not getting any benefit from exporting just crude oil. Nigeria is getting, you have to export that same thing. So one thing we should look at it, what is the ratio of Zambia copper exports to the ratio of the byproduct of copper that are also being imported into the same economy. And you see that the byproducts that are produced from the likes of copper, when we look at the wires, cables, steels, mobile phones, electronics, which are served as a major input for copper, right? Which copper serves as a major raw material for, we see that it is more compared to the copper that has been exported. So it simply means that you have raw materials, you are not turning them into finished goods, right? You are simply exporting and you're losing so much more than you could have benefited. So rather, my advice would have been that rather than we exporting just this raw copper in the case of Zambia, right, we need to convert these raw materials into semi-finished product that is able to deliver more value to the society.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Now, recently, I think about a month or two ago, one of the Nigeria's large export earnings came from non-oil products in commodities, like the cocoa, the sesame seeds, and some other crops in commodities. And that is not only peculiar to Nigeria, it's peculiar to other African countries. And when we compare these with the imports that we are getting recently, there seems to be this lopsidedness. Now, so the thing is, how can we solve this problem? Apart from the fact that we are building, it's our responsibility to build manufacturing hubs. What other way can we manage it that will be beneficial to Nigeria and to African countries? What other way can we manage it? In other words, how can we manage our debt burden compared to the exchange rate that we currently have at our disposal? Because when we export, this export tends to bring in hard currency and dollars. But when we manufacture home and sell in Africa or in Nigeria alone, our earning is in naira. But we also need to earn dollars for foreign exchange and to pay our debt obligations. So how do we solve this dilemma?
Let's look at the non-oil export. A major non-oil export for Nigeria right from the 1960s to now is cocoa, right? So it's important to note that the value of cocoa as of 2023 was trading within the range of 3,500 to 4,500 per ton, right? Now, the value of cocoa increased significantly from a range of 3,500 per ton to like about over $10,000 per ton, which means that I have not cultivated more cocoa farms. I have not increased my unit export of cocoa product, but because of the prices, right? Because of the movement in price that has moved from 3,500 or let's say average of $4,000 per ton to like about 10,000 per ton, the value has already increased. So let me look at that value. Simple mathematics seems like unit prices multiplied by the number of tonnage, or you could say that the price per ton multiplied by the total number of tonnage. Now, that same cocoa market that we're looking at, right, is also trying as much as possible to find its true self back. So recently this year, we've seen cocoa come to as low as even $5,000 per ton. So if we now say that our value of non-oil export increased significantly, simply because it increased significantly last year. Are we doing better? We are just doing better on the face of it because there is a much more demand for it. The same thing happens when we look at sesame, which is also another major non-oil export, which Nigeria exports out of Nigeria. So, but the key thing that we look at is that what are we exporting? What are we majorly exporting? We're majorly exporting raw materials. Now, if you export that raw materials, probably a bar of chocolate is sold for, let's say, $100, and me, I'm exporting my bar. So if you are saying a bar of chocolate is sold for $100, it simply means that a ton of chocolate, let's say a kg of chocolate is $100, a ton of chocolate should be like 100,000. We say 100,000. Now, how much? So I sell 1 ton of chocolate, let's say about 100,000. I need like close to like about 2x of that to be able to process it. Now, the total cocoa that will go into producing a ton of chocolate that I sold at 100,000 is less than $25,000, right? So where is the major money coming from? So something is sold for $100,000. I've only been able to sell like, let's say, $20,000. That means I've lost like about 80% of the total value in that particular product. Also, let us not forget that Nigerian ports are one of the most expensive ports, not just in Africa, but also in the world. Nigerian ports, the amount of time, aside business have a cost of financing. So for example, you've been able to take a debt finance and it's going to take you a number of days where you need to serve your interest. You get to the port, how many ships are betting on Nigerian ports? Even the ships that are betting on Nigerian ports or the cargo airlines that are coming to Nigeria, what are they taking? So it seems that we have more ships coming to Nigeria that has to wait for like another 2 weeks or 3 weeks before they leave with exports to other markets. We see cargo airlines coming to Nigeria, they are leaving empty, right? We see a lot of this trade not being captured by either the Nigerian Export Promotion Councils or the Nigerian Port Authority. Although we see that the MP recently introduced BODOGU, like more or less like a structured platform for us to be able to capture more value or drive efficiency in the port. So an average time it takes you to clear your goods, and average Nigerian port is around 15 days. Imagine when you are able to clear your goods or reduce those things within a space of 1 hour. So I save 14 days export. So if I save 14 days on my export, I look at that is 2 weeks. Let's say I save 2 weeks on the goods that I'm exporting. Currently at 27.5%. So if I take $100, if I take a 1,000 loan, I know that I'm able to have those savings. So the problem in Nigeria is that even those farms, the farm or agriculture is not really attractive enough for someone to be able to go into that. The yields on our cocoa farms have not increased significantly, thanks to the federal government and also the cocoa research institute that is trying as much as possible to produce high yield crops. But a lot of these our farms are getting old. They are not able to produce as much output. The yield per hectare are not increasing in the way they should increase. So it simply means that over the long term, not just in Africa, not just in Nigeria, also in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, which are also major cocoa exporters, and also African agricultural produce. Over the long term, we are not able to produce as much volume as we should. Then if the price crash, or just like we're seeing within that particular space, if the price drop back to the next to 4,000, which it took up from, it simply means we are back to square one. So we need to focus on certain key things. We need to ensure that these are raw materials that we keep on exporting are sustainable. What is the government incentive, or what are the structures, what are the platforms that the government is producing for people to be able to go back to the farms and harvest these raw materials? Also, what is the modalities when it comes to infrastructure development in Nigeria? what is the access to the port? We see that the government priority is to be able to set up coastal road, which is the Lagos-Calabar coastal road, which I don't have any issues with that. But I think that is not a topmost priority that we should have as at now, because there are major international, there are major internal trade corridors or major internal trade networks, which the government really need to focus more on. When we look at the contribution to the GDP, we see that the rail and water transport services increased significantly simply because it has been a bit much more effective and much more efficient than the way it has been. An average produce that leaves the farm, we see close to like about 40 to 50% being lost on distribution and storage. What is the government, what are the infrastructures put in place to be able to preserve and ensure that close to 90 or 95% of the goods that leave the farms either get to the port in healthy conditions and also get to the final consumers in healthy conditions. Also, there's going to be a shortage, there's going to be a reduction on the bargain that is placed on Nigerian product or African produce, because they will say that, oh, it is not quality, it does not meet up to this particular standard, is a low grade. So, for example, when we look at the Nigerian foreign trade in goods statistics, you see superior cocoa beans, you see we just see normal cocoa beans right there. But so it simply means that if I'm grading particular products, how can we ensure that we are not just increasing the yields on our farms, or we are not just increasing the yields on our farm produce, but we are also ensuring that we are increasing and maintaining the right form of quality on this our particular farm produce, and not just export the raw materials. If I'm able to increase Nigerian contribution from just $20,000 from just 20% in a bar of chocolate to like about 60, 80%, that money stays in here, right, in Nigeria. Now, we are not saying we are not going to export. For example, Dangote is producing, one of the major developments Dangote has done is for him to refine crude in Nigeria and also get the petrochemicals in Nigeria. And currently, he's having an ambition to increase the petrochemical plant from 650,000 barrels per day to about 700,000 barrels per day. You are exporting to the neighboring countries, right? So you reduce the demand for the importation from external markets. So if Dangote is exporting to Ghana, Cameroon, both Western and Central Africa, which means we are going to get foreign currencies into Nigeria. And if there is lesser demand, right, for the dollar, we are likely to see just the rule of demand and supply. If there is lesser demand for the foreign currencies, we are likely to see a bit of appreciation within Nigeria over the next couple of years.
Thank you so much, Oluwatosin Oladiton. Now, we are nearing the end of our conversation, so I want to ask this question because I see you hit over the same word, like we must not export raw materials. We cannot continue to export raw materials because it does not work at our advantage over here in the continent of Africa. So recently, the Chinese government, has made a policy geopolitically with regards to economic alliance. I said that the 54 countries in the continent of Africa, we are going to remove tariffs from them, and you can export your product down to China. And still we're looking at it. What are we producing and adding value that China will want to buy, or other Asian countries will want to import from the continent of Africa? And we're still asking ourselves, it looks like it's taking us back to raw materials again. However, still in agro-business, in agric, in mining, and in energy, the Chinese government said they are coming into the continent of Africa and they are coming into Nigeria. So Mr. President just secured an investment commitment of $20 billion. Whilst we do not have the right to tell the foreign investors or foreign portfolio investors to come into Nigeria to tell them where exactly they should go and invest, how can we influence them to invest in sectors in the country and to build plants and establish manufacturing hubs and factories in Nigeria so that to a large extent we can retain these raw materials within our country and give birth to jobs and employment to the massive population of young people we have?
Okay, so speaking to that, is the first question we're going to ask is these people that are coming to set up hubs in Nigeria, right? So for example, do they really have the interest of Nigerians at that? The question is either, depending on the side of argument you look at it could either be a yes or it could Now, looking at the increased tariffs and the trade war between US and China, China is majorly a producing nation, meaning that they have to export. It's majorly an export nation. Now, for example, take note that China also instituted a policy that whatever they don't import, whatever they can't produce, they should not make use of it, which means that they've reduced their import majorly to the barest minimum, right? So the only thing that the import is taking out is probably like around majorly the raw materials. Now, another question that I'm going to ask is, you're coming to set up manufacturing hubs, you're coming to set up companies in Nigeria. Are these companies going to be owned by Nigerians, or are you providing a debt that Nigerians will not be able to pay for? What are also the terms and conditions? Now, the only reason why China will say, okay, you have zero exports, zero duties, zero tariffs, or close to zero exports, zero duties, zero tariffs, so that you are able to export more to them. Now, you are going to serve as a major. We need to change the narrative from African being the source of raw materials for the global village. And the more we are able to change that narrative, now, do we have the right investments to be able to set up infrastructures in Nigeria? Yes, we say that we are still very, very far from it. The national grid that we have, which is supplying around 6,000 megawatts, 6,000 megawatts, is not even enough to power. The cost of electricity in Nigeria is also very high. So we could say that it is cheaper for you to import a product than for you to produce the same quality of that product in the local market. So we could say that it's not yet attractive for a lot of our industries is not really thriving, right? It's not yet attractive for we to be able to produce internally than for we to import. So when the cost of import is a bit cheaper or relatively cheaper than the cost of we even producing internally, of course, people want to pay based on their income. People will take buying decisions based on their income. Like the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. Now, it is very attractive for the government to we've seen the president of Nigeria traveling all around to be able to attract more foreign investment. We're trying to see a bit of stability in the foreign direct investment and also foreign portfolio investment. Recently, thanks to the CBN governor, when he said that rather than people investing in the core sector, Nigerians were putting their money in the money market, right? So we see that the central bank recently rejected like about 2 trillion that would have been invested in the Nigerian treasury bills. We say that the interest rate on the Nigerian treasury bills dropped from like about 18.3 to around the window of 17.5%. Now, it simply means that these investments are not going to the right places that is going to result in a long-term development. Now, the way we call foreign portfolio investment, we usually call it hot money, meaning that as soon as you go out, you get suya, it is very, very hot. As soon as the suya is cold, you will not really, it doesn't serve as an appetite. It's not going to stay or relate to long-term development. Now, I would rather propel or rather require that these investments come in as equity investments owned by Nigerians, right? Owned by Nigerians rather than them taking this money. And something that is very peculiar about Chinese companies, the wealth of Chinese do not stay outside China, right? So I've done a business, I've able to review the businesses of most Chinese companies in Nigeria. They get their money and immediately it doesn't stay up to 1, 2, 3 days. It doesn't stay up to a week. Yeah, in Nigeria, they take the money back to China, which simply means that they're just using Nigeria as a trading slip. So, for example, I could have 2 bank accounts. My money comes into a particular bank account. I move it almost immediately out of that particular bank account, which means that the wealth is not really sitting in Nigeria. So you come in as partnership here, you set up your companies here, but who are those that are leading that organizations? Who are those that are getting the true benefits? Is the money staying in Nigeria for you to be able to drive real development? No. So that's why we really need to look at this thing holistically. Yes, it's good for you to engage foreign portfolio investment. Yes, we also understand the rationale why debt is accounting for over 30% of Nigerians' budget in 2024. Considering the recent rebase of the GDP, our debt to GDP ratio is going to reduce significantly from like about $180 million to $180 billion to around $241 billion from the recent rebase of it. But we need to ensure that the wealth is created in Nigeria, or the wealth is created in Africa, the wealth is retained in Africa, and the wealth is sustainable in Africa. And the only way we can get that done is for us to invest to ensure we have more increase of our raw materials, we have more increase for our raw produce, and also develop our industries to be able to provide closer to the finished goods than the raw materials we are currently exporting from this nation.
All right, thank you very much. Now, in less than a minute as we round up, I'd like to ask you this. How can governments ensure that FX inflow truly leads to an inclusive development and not just macroeconomic numbers? And also, secondly, if you could quickly answer this also, what about diaspora remittances? What role do they play in FX inflows?
So first, we need to ensure that it is easier for people to do business in Nigeria. The cost of doing business in Nigeria is also very high. Nigeria does not even rank. Nigeria is ranking over about, when it comes to ease of doing business index, we're ranking about within the range of 120 to 130 among 183 nations of the globe, right? So it simply means that we need to ensure that it's easier for a business to set up in Nigeria, it's easier for a business to scale in Nigeria, and we have little or no political influence in established corporations in Nigeria, right? So it's easier for people to be able to get their things on. Many thanks to the Tax Reform Act that has recently been published by Nigeria, by the recent tax reform act that has been signed into law. We've seen that a bit of streamlining and effective administration of taxes within Nigeria. Also, when we look at these diaspora remittances, for example, let's look at last year, 30 December, we see that quite several billions came into Nigeria, right, within that particular. But what did the money come to do? Where did the money go to, right? What's the impact we've seen on it, right? The real estate sector, of course, we've also seen majorly, we've seen that the real estate sector is also contributing significantly to the GDP of Nigeria compared to what it used to be when the 2010 index was majorly made use of. Now, how do we ensure that this sector, when we even look at the real estate sector, is the real estate sector likely to result to a long-term growth of the economy? Nigeria is currently around 225 or 230 million people, hope to be like about 400 million people in 50 years. The current real estate development we have is able to cater for a population of 400 million people in the next, by 2050, right? So those things is, we need to ensure that there's an attractiveness and there's an incentive. So, for example, when the USA, they are not going to provide funding to the legacy institutions, majority of the scientists are going to China or going to Europe, right? They're trying to ensure that they're being attractive, right? Attract this best talent. Are we able to attract the best talent? Are we able to retain the best talent? Just like Prof said, that majority of those people that are coding in Silicon Valley are from Yaba. Are we able to not just develop the internal talent that we have, but also attract the best talent to be able to come in here and also retain and develop in the long-term growth of the nation, rather than just mirage or a facade of numbers that is not going to drive long-term growth over the long run?
Okay, thank you very much, Oluwatosin Oladetan. He is a seasoned public policy expert and business corporate strategist and vice president of finance with extensive experience in guiding organizations through transformation. Thank you so much for your time with us today on Just Africa. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Do enjoy the rest of the day. And
you too. Enjoy the rest of your day. That's a great place for us to wrap it up. I'm still looking at the Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC meeting. They've been sitting since yesterday. Yes. And by the end of today in their meeting, they're going to come out with new indices and new data. And the reason why they had to go where the decisions they've made, the reason why they have to make this decision, I can't really wait for that. While we wait to get all the details, we will be putting our fingers crossed, studying the economy, and looking forward to bringing you information as business investors, participants in the market, where to put your money on and making benefits for yourself. From me to you, it's been a very good time with you on the program this 2 hours. Just Africa. I'm Oyinpriye Krumaleduwa. To follow us on all our social media platforms at SouqNews TV. Many thanks for watching. Do have yourself a splendid day ahead. And
I am Olumide Shokoya. Enjoy the rest of your day.